Hello and welcome to Ill-Advised Casting. I'm your host Osa, and I am being joined by my co-host Bubba and eventually JD. Today, we present the first of many ill-advised topics.
Hello, I am Bubba, and I bring to you a discussion on alignment. I prepared a little script to start everything off, and then perhaps we can just dive into a discussion afterwards. But let me just go ahead and start with this. It's lengthy. So, alignment is often a difficult and controversial part of the Dungeons and Dragons rules, and unlike Dominion level play, has consistently made its way into every version of the game since its inception. Like many of the design choices in earlier Dungeons and Dragons, the construction of alignment was based on the preferred mode of play at the time, which was to have a large group of players, sometimes 50 at a time, playing in groups of 6 to 12, and a single dungeon master who would manage a singular campaign world that they all played in. Many of them would end up engaging in a semi-competitive and even directly competitive manner, and so to avoid too many powerful alliances from forming up, which would lock the game into stalemates or drive out new players interested in joining, the alignment system was used as a means of determining not only who was competing against whom, but also who could ally with whom. Much like using level progression as a balance between classes and Dominion level play, which essentially boils down to a game of behind the scenes paperwork without other players to compete against, this system lacks much of its flourish, punch, or value in the mode of play that we normally engage in today. But unlike those other systems, which we've seen either get derailed, smoothed out, or eliminated, alignment stuck around and has had many defenders. All of that, however, is preamble. Historical utility aside, I would have little issue with alignment systems were it not for the inconsistency of application. As Osa mentioned in one of our game sessions, a common method of dealing with alignment is to find out how the dungeon master intends to deal with alignment and then make decisions accordingly, which is probably the most scathing critique that I've ever heard of any rule system.
But it's
I can
it's
read through
fair
any
because
version.
it's fair though
Sorry.
because when it's all right. When it comes to alignment, it's really very subjective to the GM, and at the end of the day, your game master, dungeon master, what have you, they are the physics behind the world. They're the rules that create it. So you have to play towards them and make sure that you're gelling with their worldview. If not, you're going to be constantly butting heads, which is kind of the problem with these subjective systems.
Right, because if you disagree with their moral take on something, you're going to be constantly butting heads with them. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter if you've understood the GM's interpretation. If you disagree with the GM's interpretation, you're constantly going to be fighting against it,
Right. And
which is
it's
my
possible that
biggest
you
reason
can.
for normally. It really is my biggest reason for normally just cutting alignment whenever I discover it. But like we'll get to that in a second. But yeah,
Right.
it causes arguments and disruptions,
Hmm.
and
And
I
you
don't
can
need those.
school yourself to play towards your GM's interpretation of things, but you're going to always have to constantly be pulling yourself back and reevaluating it through the lens of what you think that they understand of it. And that just can
Yes.
make for a headache of a play.
And it's not like we're paid or professional or even amateur actors sitting in a play learning a script.
Right? We do this for
Like
fun.
if we disagree with a character that you're playing in a play, that's one thing. That sometimes you're supposed to. Like because sometimes you're playing a horrible person. But
And that
if
can be
you're
fun.
disagreeing with just general ideas about what is good, what is right, what is wrong, and how those should be pr- dealt with in a mechanical basis, especially in the older systems where you could. Well, anyways, like I said, I'll get to that. We've interrupted. As I was saying, I can read through any version of Dungeons and Dragons and know with certainty how hit points work, how they're determined, the standard death rules, how they're intended to be implemented, and the various optional variants provided in each system. If I encounter a dungeon master who then deals with hit points in a manner not described in the text, I would not be incorrect to say that he was using a set of homebrew rules, or, less generously, that he was screwing with my character. Either way, there would be no confusion as to how the rules were intended to be used, and deviations would be immediately notable and objectively determined. Unfortunately, you can't do that with alignment as written. Alignment has the issue that you can get 4 people to read any version of the alignment rules, which are changed with each edition, and easily get 5 interpretations. The same fictional characters can be attributed different alignments, even at the same positions within a story. and it's not difficult to back up those interpretations. Some descriptions of alignments are even so poorly written as to mean whatever it is that the dungeon master wants or needs them to be, and if you have one of the older systems and a punitive dungeon master, you can find yourself losing out on thousands of experience points because he determined that your alignment has shifted. All of which is preamble to the main questions. Why am I using the alignment system, and how shall alignment be used in my Beckme Dungeons & Dragons campaigns?
And for a bit of reference, this conversation spawned because we have recently moved away from our older systems of Call of Cthulhu and Warhammer Fantasy to play Beckme because we're trying to explore some of the more roots of Dungeons and Dragons. And those other systems don't really deal with alignment per se. So this has kind of become a really important conversation for us and on how to house rule and understand these more archaic systems.
Archaic, I like that.
Doesn't mean they're
Well, I
bad.
mean,
It just means that they came before what the modern systems are.
and that's true. And again, it's a discussion about just morality mechanics in general, because while Dungeons and Dragons and the World of Darkness games have had their own long-standing morality mechanics, with World of Darkness experimenting with them in different ways with each iteration and each monster type.
What is it that the World of Darkness tells you to do with their morality mechanics? Use it as a stick to beat the players into compliance.
That's a sincere reading of the text, though a bit abbreviated. You're
At least
encouraged
for some
to use the
versions of
morality
Vampire.
mechanics. Yes, you're encouraged to use the morality mechanics to compel your players to play the chronicle you want them to play, which is horrible advice.
It really is. You should be all playing the same chronicle that you all want to play together. If you have to wrangle them like cats to play the story you've put together, you've done something wrong.
Yes, but then a lot of other game systems, some of the more recent ones to make an appearance, things like Mithras, like Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, got rid of its morality mechanic system when it moved from first edition to second edition.
Didn't even
And
know
to
they
my
had one back
knowledge,
then.
yes, in first edition they had a morality mechanic,
Weird.
because they were copying Dungeons and Dragons. A
Okay.
lot of the old style, like Rifts and Palladium Fantasy has a morality mechanic because it started with Palladium Fantasy, which was a commentary on Dungeons and Dragons. It was what was at the time termed a Dungeons and Dragons killer, and of course it didn't. But
It didn't. But I've heard very good things about Rifts. But back
Rifts.
to Warhammer
Anyways,
Fantasy
yes.
real quick. I know that second edition, because that's what I have most experience with, thanks to Bubba running phenomenal games for us. In my experience with Warhammer Fantasy, you've got corruption points, which are chaos influencing your soul. You can get those through a couple of different means. But the closest thing to this point I've seen as a morality mechanic was when you play as an actual divine magic user, a cleric. And then at that point, if you displease your gods, there are penalties that face you. But those are the closest things I've seen to a morality mechanic, which makes sense if you're worshiping active deities, but don't make sense as just I'm a dude going about my life. Why are you ascribing cosmic good, evil, law, chaos things to me that I must abide by?
Yeah, and you'll find that in a lot of other systems where if your character isn't adherent to a deity, like your Call of Cthulhu characters, if you had gone against the greater elder powers or gods or whatever you want to call them, if you had gone against the ones that you'd allied yourself with, you would have found yourself in a world of hurt.
Good
You might
thing
have
we
found yourself
didn't
in a
do
world of
that.
hurt anyways.
I say, constantly
Uh,
spiting Narlathotep at every turn.
yeah, well, if he's letting you spite you, it's because he's letting you spite him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it wasn't going to work out long term for me. Hypnos,
No.
on the other hand, was really great to have in my corner for the moment I had him.
Yes, but also just as likely to be extremely arbitrary.
Well, he did send me on a whole spree of killing I did not appreciate.
He sure did.
All right,
Anyways,
so alignment again in D&D.
Right. So, why am I using the system that I consider to be archaic and somewhat imposing, especially if I don't feel it's necessary, because I've played a lot of fantasy games that don't have it? The answer to the first question, the why of it, is because it's baked into the general concepts of the game. The world of Dungeons and Dragons is a magical place, beholden to the cycles of multiple empires as they have risen and fallen due to their own machinations and the constant war between the cosmic forces of law and chaos, represented in both the magic systems and the immortals who take the place of gods in this world. Because the world is a magical place, so too can its thinking be magical when concerning morality, at least on some levels. Demons are entities of chaos, nihilistic, narcissistic, cruel, depraved, selfish, and bent on the elimination of those who would make something of themselves, their lives, and this world for no better reason than their own pleasure, though they often have reasons otherwise as well. Divine servants of law and neutrality are no more nor less incarnations of their own absolute moral framework, bound by a mystical latticework that ensures that no action taken by such a being can ever intentionally contradict its true nature. Dungeons, too, have their generation built into the heart of these setting conceits. While many times they are the creation of wizards or monsters for their own ends, or for the ends of immortals which patronize chaotic creatures, it is also possible for the natural forces of chaos to generate a dungeon due to mystical confluence, myths and stories being made manifest into reality, or simply as part of the natural degradation of the mystical bounds of law which enforce structure and order upon reality.
On that
As
note,
these conceits
this is an aside, it's not about alignment, but I have a very long-standing opinion that there is a god of dungeons out there. They're the reason that doors close behind you, traps reset themselves, and that they're just malignant little hellholes to journey through. And
that's
hopefully
a
we'll get into that in a
discussion.
different discussion, which I'll link later once we make that video. But just wanted to point that
Absolutely.
out there because they are mystic confluences of just fuck you.
Yes. So as these conceits are built into the very structure of the mythology which feeds the mechanics and gives weight and impetus to the actions of the players, it is simpler to use the system in a method that will work for our group rather than to rip it out root and branch.
Now, as a thought experiment before we get into this next section, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about our last session with my cleric, Clarissa. And I'm going to describe, and Bubba will help me out with this, the actions that Clarissa took during that session. And by the end of it, hopefully you can pinpoint what her alignment is. Does that sound like a fun thought experiment?
Sure. Yes, let's talk about the actions, and then let's go through the analysis of the alignments, and then we'll come back to that thought experiment and ask the question, giving the audience, I think, plenty of time to mull over the idea. So the floor is yours.
So Clarissa is a cleric. She has not yet found her deity. She is just kind of on a path to finding herself and what she believes in. And in the course of our campaign, which is only two sessions long at this point, I very much believe in letting her organically grow into a real person. Partially because BECME has a really high attrition rate where often you don't make it past level 3. So often your characters are named cleric, mage, fighter. I'm sorry, not mage, magic user. Anyhow, in our last session, we are starving, dehydrated, multiple days throughout the desert without food or water, going through a sandstorm, and we come across a ziggurat in the middle of the desert. And in that ziggurat, we find fire beetles and traps, pixies who were probably going to eat us if we hadn't fed them other things. It was a whole ordeal.
Like steel.
Yes. We're basically on death's door as we're exploring this trap-ridden, uh, decaying temple or a city or something. We're still trying to figure that out at this point because it's going to get wibbly wobbly in just a moment. Well, as we go through, we find the mutilated, fairly fresh corpse of some kind of human in ceremonial robes and a gold mask, and Clarissa proceeds to loot the body and put on the gold mask. Why? Well, out of character because encumbrance is really important in this campaign, and in character because, well, there are obviously people wandering around here. This is ceremonial garb. She is a cleric, and hopefully by wearing that mask, she will be able to engender some form of trust in them.
As an aside, and again, I haven't done as thorough a reading of the rules as I'd like to. The Rules Cyclopedia is dense. Current, my ruling is that if you are wearing regular clothes, And I consider a standard mask that doesn't provide any kind of armor to just be regular clothing. I don't count it for encumbrance purposes. And again, that might actually be a standard rule. It's not
Because
entirely clear how it treats regular clothes,
it
but
does treat regular clothes as not counting towards your encumbrance. Armor is
okay.
different, but regular clothes,
Yes.
what you're wearing, do not.
Yes.
And
It is
we are
clear that
using
if
the
you're carrying it
Beckme
in like a
Rules
backpack
Encyclopedia.
or a bag or in your hands, that the clothing has encumbrance.
Right.
But yes, so your boots, your belts, your pants, your shirt, your dress, your mask doesn't have encumbrance
Right.
unless you're carrying it off your body.
Exactly.
Um,
And so she dons this mask, and we then eat the geckos who had just killed, well, not just, but had killed this individual and feasted upon him. So I guess we're eating flesh. There's moral complications there that we're not going to get into. Anyway,
we
uh,
eat those who eat us.
it happens. So while we're doing this, four dreamers come across us and they offer us honey water, which actually hydrates us. So now our characters have been fed and they've been watered, and we've found that these dreamers are kind of really zonked out on some kind of really good stuff. And we're able to kind of trick them throughout the course of our conversations, because once they turn around, they don't even remember they talked to us, into filling our water flasks, which, as far as we're concerned at this point, water is an incredibly scarce resource. We don't know where these people came from. They were a random encounter, but our characters don't know that, or how they get this water. For all we know, this is all they have to go on for the next month. But we tricked them into filling all of our water flasks. There are 9 of us and 4 of them. So we've just taken advantage of some really vulnerable people. After that, they wander off, and we assume they're going to be okay, even though we know that there are traps and monsters up on this floor, and we haven't explored the whole thing. After that, after a little exploring, we come across a garrison of zealots. We're going to call them zealots. They're the brothers of Grom.
Gorm.
Gorm? Okay,
Gorm.
Gorm. Yes. And he
I
is.
kept. That's my fault.
Oh, it's all right. We kept on calling him things like Crom and Grom and like 13 different other pop culture deity references.
We had watched some Conan not long before watching this, so I misread it as Grom, and I was just like, aha, by
It's
Grom.
stuck. And it's stuck.
It did.
But we found the brothers of Gorm, who, through various conversations, separated our party, and we left some of our members, our more fighting kind of members, with them, and we took their captain, Captain Canadius, upstairs with us. And along the way, we found the Dreamers again, saved them from the Pixies, and kind of brokered peace with them. But we were going to show them the outside, because right now we are deep with, well, not deep, but we're within the ziggurat, and these guys were really out of it. They didn't even know what the word outside meant. They didn't know what the word, that there was an outside. They'd been talking about some underground city and some civilization they were going to rebuild, which was nonsense to us, because how do you live underground? But we take Canadius and the 4 dreamers that we found upstairs to the entrance that we'd found. And imagine you'd lived underground your whole life, and you just came in contact with the open sky. It terrified them. They didn't know what to make of it. And this might have been because of the magical influence that they were all under due to the drugs that they'd been taking. More on that later. One of the dreamers breaks free of their reverie and actually wakes up. And Canadius wants nothing to do with any of this and rushes back to the barracks. Through shenanigans, which we will go through later in a campaign diary, eventually Canadius and his men become drugged and in the same dreamer's stupor that they will never wake from. They don't know who they are, they don't know what they are, except for the Brothers of Grom. And to make a long story short, we committed, no, not we, this was entirely Clarissa's fault, committed some crimes against humanity by breaking the psyche of Canadius, their captain, making him forget who he was, and that he was just another pleb with a whole new identity as a private within the, or whatever lowest ranking term would be for the Brothers of Grom, and had installed one of our party members as Captain Canadius, the Justicar of Grom, to lead the other 11, now entirely brainwashed and drugged members, to our advantage. This might be for the best for them, it might not. That night, uh, Clarissa received a visitation from the gods who requested that she help free the city from the influence of some kind of tentacled, as far as Clarissa's concerned, demon or fell deity that had cursed the city and its inhabitants to while away in some form or another and had been drugging everyone. They were surprised when she agreed because she made it sound like she would leave immediately because she spent her life as a pit fighter and they had kind of like tricked and trapped our group into it. At the end, once they agreed to let her go, she doubled back and said, yes, I will help you. I will free these people. And after that, we looted the treasury of the Brothers of Grom for our own purposes and are now continuing forward. Did I leave out any important details?
The player who took over the position of Canadius, Justicar Gorm, has effectively remotivated them to actually do some stuff, though they are all high as freaking kites, so don't
Oh,
be
yeah.
surprised when all of this goes south on everything.
Oh, yeah. I don't expect
I
a
have not
happy ending for any of this, but for
I have
context,
not
these.
just given you 11 free minions. Don't think that that's what's happened at all.
Oh, no. As far as I'm concerned, we've acquired 11 free minions. You know my skill at managing minions, especially impaired
But you're
ones.
not the one directly managing them. Remember, you have been adopted
Oh,
by.
no.
Yeah.
That's a problem for another day, everybody. I would like to pretend that our previously very chaotic friend is going to do a really good job leading these people to the best of their abilities because when we first met them, my instinct was to pretend to be a dreamer and lie my ass off. And he immediately volunteered that we robbed that dead body blind and that we were from outside of this place. He was a very honest and trustworthy person, while my first instinct was to lie my ass off to try and get whatever advantage I could because we are in a life or death situation.
To be fair, you had just encountered 7 HD worth of enemies who, if I had rolled a 2 on the reaction roll, they would have been immediately hostile and just tried to kill you.
Very true. And for reference, we are level 1 characters with, I think, the max hit points one of us has is 6. So anything that we fight that gets a good damage roll in is just going to one pop us.
Yeah, they're all 120 away from just insta death.
So we're having to be very smart about everything we do, very cutthroat. Which I mean, that's the environment I thrive in, but it's certainly not one that you can be morally upstanding in as much as you would like. At least
We definitely do need to do those diaries sooner rather than later before we forget everything.
We do. That's kind of why I kind of spilled some of this here, so it's at least on record. But
Fair.
But yes,
Anyways,
those were the actions of Clarissa, and I'd like you to keep all of those in mind because none of this has been made to put her in a better or worse light than she actually was. Unless I've missed something. Was that pretty much on point as it happened?
No, that's on point.
Okay. She has done quite a bit of bartering to ensure safety, like with the pixies, but again, that was kind of more self-serving survival than anything else. Welcome back. We just had a short break. JD has joined us. They were the player for the unholy trinity of was it Tony, Tommy, and
Tommy,
Timmy?
and Tony.
Say that one more time.
Timmy, Tommy, and Tony. The Derek and triplets.
The 3 T's, our trinities. Which one of those ended up taking Canadius's place?
That would be Timmy.
Timmy? Yeah, he became very stand-up. He was very honest going in, and now he's passing himself off as their leader, which seems to have given him quite a bit of backbone and like authority and stick-to-itiveness, gumption.
It's certainly given him more character than he had before.
Yeah.
Tommy and Tony both had a lot more characterization from the start. Tony being, the thief, the one who talks like this and gets all the ridiculous stuff out of the way, and
talks with his hands.
Tommy, yeah, exactly. And Tommy being the wizard who was in charge of the 3 idiots.
Was being a key word there.
But
Yeah.
Timmy seems to be taking his role as their leader pretty seriously.
Yeah, he definitely feels like he got forced into it a little bit, but also he doesn't trust anyone else to do it because he's seen what you people are capable of.
I have done
That's lawful if I've ever heard
nothing
of it.
wrong, Clarissa says from the background.
Debatable.
There have been no
All right.
crimes against humanity here. All right, but that was the brief recap of most of Clarissa's actions for last session.
How shall we use alignment? First, from the text of the book, then to the analysis and method of implementation. Law or lawful, from page 11 of the Rules Cyclopedia. Law is the belief that everything should follow in order, and that obeying rules is the natural way of life. Lawful creatures will try to tell the truth, obey laws that are fair, keep promises, and care for all living things. If a choice must be made between the benefit of a group or an individual, a lawful character will usually choose the group. Sometimes individual freedoms must be given up for the good of the group. Lawful characters and monsters often act in predictable ways. Lawful behavior is usually the same as good behavior. The example of alignment behavior given in the text is as follows. Take this situation as an example. A group of player characters is attacked by a large number of monsters. Escape is not possible unless the monsters are slowed down. A lawful character will fight to protect the group, regardless of the danger. The character will not run away unless the whole group does so or is otherwise safe. Given these descriptions, a lawful character is one who believes in Terry Pratchett's big lies, the ones about justice, mercy, duty, and all the other pillars of society and social order. They believe in a rightness to the world, an order that does not occur naturally, but one that, with the right effort, can be made real nonetheless. Such people are not necessarily good by our understanding of the word, however. Our modern conception around slavery would have that it is not good, but the Phaeacian soldier, same as a Roman one, would argue that it is an institution that allowed for the preservation of societies and peoples that would otherwise have been destroyed, enables the utilitarian punishment of criminals that would otherwise had to have been exiled or killed, and have enabled the expansion of a strong force for order and stability around the world. And he would be no less lawful in his disposition than an abolitionist would be concerning the elimination of slavery as an institution that harms both the individual and society as a whole, and each would fight to defend his position, possibly even to the death. That said, about 20 to 40% of any given human or demi-human society will be made up of such people, dedicated to such high-minded concepts and to the maintenance of the group and society, dedicated to duty, to honor, and to such ideas of rightness and goodness that their societies have inculcated, as well as to pushing those members of such societies to follow and adhere to its highest ideals and standards, maybe even a little bit better.
Now, doubling back just a moment, you mentioned that these are generally behaviors that are associated with good, right?
Yes.
So that's the other thing about this weird little axis here, because in later editions of D&D, you've got the whole good, evil, lawful, chaotic, and neutral nonsense. I know lawful and chaotic is much more wibbly wobbly, but so are good and evil. Good and evil are also really wibbly wobbly.
Can I say something real quick?
Of course.
Go for it.
I know this is a minority opinion in this chat. I personally do like the 9 alignment grid with the lawful, chaotic, good, and evil.
Okay.
Okay. What do you like about it?
Specifically, I feel like it adds more depth than what you would get than what we have right now with just lawful, chaotic, and neutral.
Well, that was the actual purpose for
Right,
creating
exactly.
the dual axis system, was
And
to
it's
create a system with more flexibility and depth.
Yeah,
Right,
it certainly adds to it. I actually kind of liked it, especially when I was younger, when it works as a way to add flavor and depth and not as handcuffs.
Right, and I feel like alignment in general is misinterpreted.
What's your interpretation?
It's literally impossible to be fixed to an alignment as a person,
Well,
as a human being.
That's true, and I have a take on that later. But no, I fully agree with you. In my opinion, mortals, anything with free will is constantly fluctuating. You might have things that you do that are good or bad in one day. You might be a little bit more lawful or chaotic the other day, but everything's in flux. Everything is shades of gray and spectrums.
Exactly. And it has to be written into your DNA as like an outsider or monster for you to be specifically one thing that cannot change.
Okay, then I guess I can get
And
into it
so
now. When I run, specifically mortals, they don't get alignment systems because it's just all wibbly wobbly. Outsiders, things of extraplanar and origin, those are, they don't really have free will. They are what they are, so they get alignments.
I think mortals should have alignment. It just shouldn't be something that you're stuck to. It should be more of a goal that you try and reach for as a character.
Yeah, that code of
So
ethics
this
and
is
morals that you try and strive towards.
so this is something that you did miss out at the beginning, where I discussed the magical thinking behind the magical basis of the magical morality system, as far as it concerns things like demons.
Oh, I did want you to expand on that because we've had private conversations about it, which I know exactly what you're talking about. But could you expand on that so for JD and our eventual audience?
I'm going to go full Ferengi on this one. As page 2, chapter 4 clearly states, paragraph 4 clearly states, demons are entities of chaos. Nihilistic, narcissistic, cruel, depraved, selfish, and bent on the elimination of those who would make something of themselves, their lives, and this world for no better reason than their own pleasure, though they often have reasons otherwise as well.
So me on a
Divine
bad
servants.
day.
Divine servants of law and neutrality are no more nor less incarnations of their own absolute moral framework, bound by a mystical lattice work that ensures that no action taken by such a being can ever intentionally contradict its true nature.
That's right.
Magic creatures are magical, and therefore can follow magical logic, as opposed to much more grounded physical reality.
Right. They are what they are. It's written into their magical DNA.
Yes.
But mortals, by sheer dint of their free will, you might be able to categorize a person to generally chaotic good, but they're going to be who they are. They're going to change their mind and do their thing as they go through life. It's a generalization at best, but not handcuffs, which are often what I've seen in other groups I've played with.
Yes, and we will definitely get to the handcuffs portion later, because a lot of the derision that people have in modern D&D for discussions or complaint about morality mechanic stems from the fact that a long time ago, WotC decided to get rid of the handcuffs, but there are handcuffs, and we will get to that.
But JD, just so you do know, you're not necessarily in the minority. I do quite enjoy alignment systems. I think they add a lot of flavor and depth to the world and the characters.
I'm going to say the moment I think that the fist fight is going to break up in my game group because of alignment, I'm going to get rid of the system post haste.
I'm going to have to add an addendum for that freaking reference. Thank you now.
See, I really like lawful
Sorry,
evil.
another fist fight.
I'm sorry, you really like lawful what now?
Lawful evil.
What do you
I
like
think it's
about
underrated. I love the idea of characters that follow the rules in a way that only benefits them.
it? You can make for some
People
very
who
satisfying villains.
Yeah, people who exploit the system, who do whatever they can get away with without getting in trouble, that only benefits them or people they care about. That's why I would love to play specifically a like
Raceland style
warlock.
character.
Well, no, I was specifically thinking of a warlock or somebody who part of their pact is that they can't tell lies, but they're still lawful evil. So the whole thing is just them being like, I can't lie, and then manipulating people anyway.
I already know that you're patrons of Fae of some kind. You have the same weakness. You can't tell lies, but you have to get their agenda completed regardless. That could be a lot of fun.
I really do feel like. Do you recognize the reference I made?
Yes, I know what you mean when you say Raceland Majir.
Yes.
God, I wish I could be Raceland Majir.
I mean,
we all?
Including all the bad shit.
Not being able to tell lies because of a mystical pact is not the same thing as being lawful. Raceland
No,
was
I
lawful
know.
because he held to a standard of ethics that he considered to be more important than his personal goals. Not telling lies, being truthful and honest with people was something that he considered and prided himself on. Not having debts, not being beholden to anyone else's favor for his continuance. These were things that he considered of absolute and utmost concern. It's why, for instance, when
Is
his
it
apprentice betrayed him for the first time, he punished his apprentice, but he also forgave him because he expected that from his apprentice.
but that's a
He gets
very,
one.
very, very centric moral code. That's a very
Yes.
me-centered moral code.
Yes.
So
It doesn't
I
benefit
know
the society.
the only reason that I brought up being like mystically bound to tell the truth is
Mhm.
because realistically, if you're at a table with a bunch of other people and you tell them my character doesn't lie, they're not going to believe you.
True
But if
facts.
you tell them my character literally can't lie, they
Mhm.
will believe you, even if that is actually a lie.
I am still going to treat that with 90% suspicion just because I know how easy it is to lie without lying.
Well, that's just because you're smarter than the average bear.
Well, that just means I'm a bad person, but sure, we'll go with
Uh,
that.
I'd also like to point out that lawful evil can easily be wrapped up into Beckme's chaotic just fine.
Yeah, but one thing I do like about Beckme's alignment system, the 3-point system, is that it doesn't bother with actual good and actual evil. Because what is good in one society could be considered evil in another. It's very much all down to the situation and what is going on in that society. I view good and evil for the most part, not all the way, but for the most part, a very subjective system and not necessarily objective.
Yes. So back to the text for a moment.
Oh, yep. Thank
So
you for your insight, JD.
I do
If
appreciate
you want
it.
to call it that.
Hey, I do. It's great to learn about what you think and what you feel. That helps us understand you.
Okay, Mr. Rogers.
Well, and I
It is
started
a
out with
wonderful day in the neighborhood.
the ethical morality divide. That's where I cut my teeth on 2.5, though I didn't know it was 2.5 at the time. So I get the nostalgia value at the very least, if not. Well, we'll get to that. Back to the text. Chaos or chaotic. From page 11 of the Rules Cyclopedia. Chaos is the opposite of law. It is the belief that life is random and that chance and luck rule the world. Laws are made to be broken, as long as a person can get away with it. It is not important to keep promises, and lying and telling the truth are both useful. To a chaotic creature, the individual is the most important of all things. Selfishness is the normal way of life, and the group is not important. Chaotics often act on sudden desires and whims. They have strong belief in the power of luck. They cannot always be trusted. Chaotic behavior is usually the same as behavior that could be called evil. Each individual player must decide if his chaotic character is closer to a mean, selfish, evil personality, or merely a happy-go-lucky, unpredictable personality. To continue the example given under lawful, a chaotic character might fight the monsters, or he might run away immediately. Chaotics are, as always, unpredictable. The character may not even care what happened to the rest of the party. It feels as if there is some effort being made to eat the cake and keep it in these descriptions. On the one hand, the character is focused on himself, not the individual as a legal concept nor a philosophical one, as described in our federal constitution or perhaps in libertarian doctrines, as that would represent a lawful perspective, the defense of the individual and individual rights. Rather, it is a self-centered one, in which an individual, not the individual, is the focus and whole of the character's world, namely himself. All efforts, agendas, goals, and actions are dedicated to serving such a singular priority. While it is possible to turn such individuals into anti-heroic guises, even the anti-heroes of our stories tend only to be outsiders from a specific concept of society or law, not of goodness or rightness as general concepts. So the anti-hero that challenges the unfair and unjust positions of a society can be, and is sometimes more often, of lawful nature than the enforcers of unfair and unjust laws.
Now, keep in mind that your chaotic characters can definitely work towards the interest of the people around them, because sometimes the best form of self-interest is taking care of those around you so they can take care of you more.
We'll actually get to that. That's commented on later. You're jumping the gun. In a rising society, the number of people that are chaotic alignments will be necessarily low. The more society must have all its members pull together simply to survive and grow towards its aspirations, the less likely it is for such members to be tolerated, unless they are good at hiding their otherwise self-centered intents behind a wall of self-interested virtue. Hence my decision to eliminate alignment languages.
Could you expand on the alignment languages real quick? Because it's not really touched on anywhere in this conversation, and it is a little important.
I'll get to that. As societies grow larger and more prosperous, so too will the likelihood of such individuals surviving and even thriving within those societies. The social decay, faltering of a society, can be marked by the growing percentage of chaotic aligned people. Okay, so under standard BECME rules, BX, BECME, Rules Cyclopedia, I don't hold that thought.
Holding.
Me pulling out the second edition player's handbook. Let's see. Alignment, page 64. Okay, so yes. Second edition, and I can't comment on first edition, I don't have a copy of it, but I do have a copy of Osric. So hold on.
All right.
Osric is supposedly the recompilation of first edition. But second edition does not have alignment languages.
Okay.
Okay, it doesn't look like first edition had. Oh, no, yes. According to Osric, there are alignment languages. So I guess first edition had alignment languages, but it looks like they dropped those for second edition. Second edition also added something very interesting: non-aligned creatures. In addition to the alignments above, some things, particularly unintelligent monsters, killer plants, etc., and animals, never bother with moral and ethical concerns. For these creatures, alignment is simply not applicable. A dog, even a well-trained one, is neither good nor evil, lawful nor chaotic. It is simply a dog. For these creatures, alignment is always depicted as neutral. And actually, we'll get to that in a second. Now, back to... So, okay. Yes.
So how did alignment languages work previously in other editions, I guess?
In standard Dungeons & Dragons, and it's hard to, like, because of the naming conventions, and this is all WotC's fault, because of the naming conventions and the shift from Advanced Dungeons & Dragons second edition, and then that being the line that third edition follows, and just removing the advanced, it means that there's a lot of confusion around the names, because technically Rules Cyclopedia is third edition Dungeons & Dragons, but, you know, it doesn't follow the same line of descent. But in the older systems, in first edition AD&D and in Basic Expert, BECME, and the Rules Cyclopedia, the alignments each have their own languages that you can use to communicate with others who share the same alignment that you do. And then you're told not to do that. The rules even go to some extent to tell you that it is a social faux pas and that it will never be done because there's no reason why anyone would ever break with the rules of politeness or good decorum to use their alignment languages ever.
That sounds like a very lawful way of thinking.
It's stupid. The chaotic people will gladly not let other people know that they're chaotic. And the neutral people will often be confused as to why it matters. And the lawful people want people who will actually back them up and not run the fuck away. And they're going to be testing everybody's language. I don't give a shit. At a certain point, they're just going to go, no, Bob and Timmy and Tony and whoever, I don't know the alignments of your character, sorry, so I'm just throwing out random names. But like these guys, they ran away during the middle of this, and we're just... Can you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? They say while speaking in lawful. And if the answer is, I don't know what he just said, you're out, buddy.
So if I understand how alignment languages work, you received either the lawful, neutral, or chaotic language, and if you shared that language, you could understand it, which was a phenomenal and terrible idea because it would allow your lawful characters to suss out the other lawful characters, because if you're chaotic, you could not learn it. And so forth and so on, so you could find your friends, find your enemies, and it caused problems.
Yes. There's even actually an NPC, quote-unquote monster. It's not really a monster. It's called the Executioner. They're humans. They're basically advanced thief-type humans. They're a derivation of the assassin that was used in first edition AD&D. And one of their special features is that they can speak languages, alignment languages that aren't theirs. Because their job was to basically be the king's assassin, king being just a general term.
Now, another good case for alignment languages is when you have those extraplanar entities we were talking about. You know, they don't have free will, so forth, so on. the angels, they speak lawful. And you might
Sure.
not have that language, but because you share the alignment, you understand exactly what they're saying, and your chaotic party members need to get shanked now because you now know they're chaotic.
It becomes it becomes a problem. It's
But
right
but
up
it's
there
not
with
it's not a mortal actually using it, so you can't just
right.
abuse it willy nilly. You can't
But
play Among
yes,
Us.
I mean it's honestly as bad as the paladins starting with no alignment.
No
Some
alignment.
versions, it's easier to use that ability than in others, but sometimes it could just get down to the point where the paladin was just going, is this person evil? No. Okay. Is this person evil? Yes. Kill him. Why? Because it's never wrong to kill an evil person.
I don't know about that.
Well, it just depends. Are you evil? Where, how does one become evil? Does one become evil because of evil actions? If that's the case, then this person is evil, therefore he has done evil things, therefore he should die.
Now we're back to the
Or,
good evil is subjective problem.
right. Or is the person evil inherently and therefore will do evil actions because bad people do bad things, and therefore the evil person has to die? But it becomes an issue.
That's alignment languages, and why I've eliminated them because they do cause certain problems when you can just speak your alignment language and suss out your other languages
Hmm.
and kind of where they came from.
Yes, because given the ability to suss them out, lawful characters would never associate with non-lawful characters, especially on
Or at least chaotic
missions of
characters.
daring do and great danger.
The neutrals might still be somewhat trustworthy if you can
Somewhat.
motivate them
And
properly, but the chaotic,
let's actually get into what's going to be my interpretation for neutrality.
yeah. See,
And
it all comes down to the GM's interpretation yet again.
and I don't like that, but it is what I have to live with. Neutrality, or neutral, from page 11 of the Rules Cyclopedia. Neutrality is the belief that the world is a balance between law and chaos. It is important that neither side get too much power and upset this balance. The individual is important, but so is the group. The two sides must work together. A neutral character is most interested in personal survival. Such characters believe in their own wits and abilities rather than luck. They tend to return the treatment they receive from others. Neutral characters will join a party if they think it is their own best interest, but will not be overly helpful unless there is some sort of profit in it. Neutral behavior may be considered good or evil or neither. To finish the example, a neutral character will fight to protect the group as long as it is reasonably safe to do so. If the danger is too great, the character will try to save himself, even at the expense of the rest of the party. This description is perhaps an even more of a mixed bag of contradictory concepts than that given for chaos. The first paragraph is that of philosophical neutral, the concept that balance needs to be maintained between the forces of law and chaos, else bad things will happen. Bad things are here defined as the overemphasis on one side of the individual versus society divide, which would have some weight if the spirit of chaos wasn't a goblin held enslaved to Sauron dedicated to killing you. Yes, you, personally. Or if concepts such as individual rights were not themselves enshrined or held as sacred positions of governmental institutions designed to secure and expand upon such rights. The second paragraph gives us the more animalistic concept. A bear is neither lawful nor chaotic, for it cannot fathom concepts such as society. Duty, honor, and justice are as foreign a concept as theft and murder. It eats, it sleeps, it makes copies of itself. That it protects and ensures will also eat, sleep, and make further copies. However, such a concept is unfit for human or demi-human characters, as they possess and have even created such concepts as justice and murder. A neutral character is one who isn't dedicated to the concepts of justice, duty, and honor. He will go along with the soldier that defends slavery or the abolitionist, not because he believes that either is good or right, but because he believes that he will be on the winning side. He doesn't possess the self-centered nature of the chaotic and will make sacrifices, both big and small, for loved ones and family members, but he must still be incentivized to do the right thing, especially if doing the right thing means making life harder for himself and for those people he specifically cares about. While not necessarily a coward as described in the example above, such a man can be willing to run into a burning building to save his child or friend, but will likely be unwilling to do the same to save a stranger unless given other incentives and protections. Such people make up the greater bulk of any given society. The independent frontiersman and a gang member are as likely to be neutral as any other alignment.
So doubling back real quick to the whole a bear is what a bear is, and that makes it neutral or nothing at all. When you think about your extra planar entities, the ones who don't actually have free will, they just are what they are. In a way, in a metatextual way, that could mean that your angel, who is all about the law and good of the universe, it just is what they are. They are.
Yes.
It's actually neutral in a real sense because they can't conceive of doing anything other than that.
There is a problem of free will within the conceits. The question being, does morality make sense if you have no choice? Can a robot programmed to exterminate all life indiscriminately be considered an evil thing, even though it happens to be intelligent?
And I personally would say no. I think that things like that should not actually have an alignment at all. But then you get into the fact that this is also a game system, and a lot of the spells and abilities are centered around, well, not a lot, but enough of them are centered around what is the alignment of X thing. And having null alignment doesn't really work in that conceit.
The other thing you have to consider is that the alignment is, and this is going back to my previous statement about why I'm not just ditching alignment as anything more than perhaps a personality trait to write on your character that you can think about and use as a framework.
Would you also like our blood types?
Say that again?
Would you also like our blood types?
Yes, well, no, but if this were an anime-based game, perhaps.
All right, I'll remember that for Bessem next time.
It was not actually a dissimilar conceit as asking somebody their star sign.
Exactly. That's why I brought it up. I would respect star signs as your alignment way more than just alignment. To be honest,
as the handcuffless kind of just an idea about personality matrix. I have no problem with alignment. But let's talk about those handcuffs, shall we? Alignment changes from page 143 of the Rules Cyclopedia. Sometimes a player forgets or ignores the alignment of his character and plays the adventurer incorrectly. You should talk privately with the player about the problem and encourage the proper play of alignment. Never do this during a game. Deal with the problem in private. If the problem continues after you have warned the player more than once, you may tell the player to change the alignment of the character to the alignment actually being played. You may also assess a penalty against the character at this time, such as the loss of one level of experience. Remember, too, that you have not changed the character's alignment. The player has by playing his character as a different alignment. Sometimes players will change their character's alignments for appropriate reasons. If a character is affected by a Helm of Alignment changing or other cursed treasure that affects alignment, then obviously the player had no choice. Generally, the original alignment will return a period of time after the Helm or the curse is removed. Also, events in the life of a character might force the player to reevaluate the character's personality and play him differently. So long as he plays the new alignment well and consistently, there should be no problems. If you penalize alignment changes, you should also reward good alignment play by awarding more experience or treasures. So, before I discuss how I intend to actually use these, the Rules Cyclopedia is far more generous than other versions of Dungeons and Dragons. In second edition, you were supposed to lose all of the experience you had for your current level and start again. Which, if you were, say, a couple hundred experience points into your level, was almost meaningless, especially at the higher levels. But if you were, say, 90% of the way there, and the GM just determined that you had been playing your alignment incorrectly, your 12th level character could suddenly find himself having to regain the entirety of the experience from 12th to 13th all over again. And since the GM's word was law under the rules of older editions, The only real recourse that someone like me would have would be to say, well, that's okay. I can run something.
Always a phenomenal rebuttal to a terrible GM.
Yes, there are and have been historically handcuffs, sometimes very severe handcuffs. Ones that are completely outside the context of just immortals or gods, clerics and whatnot, who would be dedicated to such things. Here, at the very least, it's considered an optional rule to use them, and if you do use them, you're encouraged to reward, quote unquote, good alignment play. But again, that's going to depend upon the GM's judgment and also require that the GM remembers to do that. And that's one more thing for the GM to remember to do.
And it's not like they don't have a lot to remember. On a personal note, I advocate for not using the penalty because your character is just doing free will kind of things. But if they're making tough choices to stay within their alignment, they should be rewarded for that.
So there are other rules that can actually cover that already without using this optional rule. Because good roleplay, especially making personal heroic sacrifices, or quote unquote heroic sacrifices, depending upon your definition of the word, based upon your alignment or upon the needs of the group, should receive a reward. So that's well and good covered already. No need to add a new rule. And if you want, at some point, we could probably do a video over the experience chapter. Like, the Rules Cyclopedia is dense. I'm all for character growth and development. This is one of the many things that often draws people to this hobby. Watching a lawful man descend into the depravity of chaos in Citizen Kane, seeing a neutral disposition lean towards a lawful orientation in A Christmas Carol, and even observing a chaotic creature slowly lurch its way towards lawful, as in Spike's slow transformation in Buffy, make for grand and glorious epics. I won't be imposing any harsh mechanical penalties for alignment switching that aren't context dependent. That said, if you are a cleric of an immortal that demands a specific alignment and code of behavior from his clerics, as most of them do, then you will lose any boons associated with service to that immortal and, in the moment of the switch, will lose access to all and every clerical ability until you are able to meditate for the day to rememorize your spells and restore your association with your new alignment and your mystical connections. This can be represented through the passage of time, associating with a new immortal, or even going on a quest of some kind, depending upon the significance, severity, and context of the switch. Such determinations should happen as a discussion between the dungeon master and the player in question, not merely made as an arbitrary and absolute decision. The same will hold for paladins, avengers, and any other character who has otherwise had powers bestowed upon him for service to an immortal. For unique abilities, this might even represent something lost forever. And that's it.
So that's the end of our house rules portion of this document, which gives a pretty decent rundown on how alignment will probably be treated in this game until it gets updated again.
I've been thinking about this for about 6 months now, honestly.
Okay. I believe that.
So,
I know how you tend to go about these things, but also once it's had contact with the enemy, so to speak, it does tend to evolve a bit more.
true. I think the most important part of the rule will remain consistent, which is that the decisions about changing alignments should never be made as an arbitrary and absolute decision.
Because again, we got that free will going on.
Yes, player agency is vitally important.
Mm-hmm. You're here to have fun and play a game, not to be railroaded into doing a job.
Nor to get a degree in philosophy or ethics.
I mean, to be fair, if I could get a degree in either of those through playing D&D, I certainly would.
That would be entertaining, to say the least.
Not a very useful degree, though. No offense to any listeners that might believe that.
Or have philosophy degrees.
I heard it goes really well when you mix it with marketing. I think that's because marketing is doing 95% of the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
As every ethics textbook will tell you, our ethics professionals most likely become unethical. I'll tell you that straight up in the lectures and in the textbooks. Like, because so many people just, if those who study ethics will often, anyways. So okay, so something that's entertaining is, so Rules Cyclopedia and other versions of Dungeons and Dragons had rules for taking your characters into other dungeon masters campaigns.
Okay.
So I just want you to consider the arbitrariness and inconsistency for how um, alignment systems are interpreted. And then you're going to take one character from one campaign who you have been playing one particular way, and you're going to take that character into another Dungeon Master's campaign, and then that Dungeon Master will determine if he is still following the alignment listed on the character sheet based upon a different criterion, perhaps. And then suddenly, your almost 13th level fighter has to start all the way back at the beginning because this dungeon master has decided that no, the previous dungeon master was wrong in his interpretation, and now your character has to start all of his advancement all over again.
And again, we're back in the topic of subjective mechanics and handcuffs.
Mm-hmm. It became a serious problem because this was a very common thing as well. Like the larger groups that I mentioned at the beginning, there were rules about it. They would write, dungeon masters would write little cards with a signature on it that would tell uh, would function basically as proof of the receipt of magic items, for instance. So that when you took your character into another Dungeon Master's game, you would have this writ of receipt indicating that you had not just made up the magic items. And since a lot of these people played in the same circles, or knew of each other, it was easy for them to verify that these were in fact true.
Yeah, I had experience with something similar back when I was LARPing with the Mind's Eye Theater. Yeah, this really
Okay.
extensive approval system and ways to check your character progress between chapters and items that you'd acquired and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
So you're familiar with the concept.
yeah, I am. It was very weird because it was the only thing I'd ever encountered, but it was organized play,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, I was impressed with it because that was a lot more organization than I thought a role playing game deserved, but it made
But
sense.
this has its origins in the wargaming origins of Dungeons and Dragons. Um, so it's nice to see that some traditions held true, even though
Yeah,
it's a weird one for us because it no longer really works that way for tabletop role playing games. Most people don't take their character from one dungeon master to another. If I were to take a Call of Cthulhu character from one game that I'd played and tried to insert him into another keeper's game, I would probably be laughed at.
that's true. But for the LARPs and like the Mind's Eye Theater, they've got chapters all across the country and in actually different countries. So if you ever
Mm-hmm.
moved, you could take your character from one game to the next. And because the way they did it is it was all interconnected with inter-country plot and city plot lines, because they did big things like that. It let you
Right,
stay part of the essentially global campaign.
which is neat.
Yeah, I was very impressed with it. I did it for Changeling, which I really wish I could have kept up with, but it was very impressive.
How did I mean? I don't know what I forget. I know we played a couple sessions with the Lost,
Mhm.
um, but I honestly couldn't tell you anything about the morality mechanics of the Lost to save my life. I
Oh,
would be
that's because they weren't
lost
really morality
if you were
mechanics. The way that
right.
Changeling the Lost did it was all about clarity. It was about your connection to actual concrete reality and your sanity. So
Okay,
they didn't bother with beating over the head with morality stuff like that, like they
so
would
there
for
were
humans or
fewer
vampires.
fewer subjective criteria.
Yeah, which is why I liked it a bit more than the other systems.
The oldest system, the older systems. And I kind of like what they did with Chronicles of Darkness for the human quote unquote morality mechanic, which isn't even a morality mechanic, it's an adaptation of sanity mechanics a la Call of Cthulhu.
That's fair.
Um, so instead of becoming evil by your actions, you become crazy by the things you encounter.
That is how life works.
Sometimes.
Usually. I'm not driven mad by staying inside my room and reading a book. I'm driven mad by the things I encounter out in the world.
No, it depends upon the book.
Or if you're a pussy.
You ever read anything by the Marquis de Sade?
No, have you ever read Ayn Rand?
I played a game that might have been
I
made by Ayn Rand.
Ayn Rand.
Or we
Overall,
can
Atlas
dive into
Shrugged is actually a
philosophy.
fairly easy read. Don't really get the point.
I refuse to read it.
I
Oh
mean,
no, wait, I was supposed to read The Firmament. Whatever, I didn't read that either.
have fun with that.
Good
I
luck.
refused.
Having listened to the various descriptions of lawful, chaotic, and neutral, what do you think Clarissa's actions fall under? Is she a lawful character because she is trying to save the city and primarily interested in protecting her party members? Is she neutral because she really wants to save her own skin and she is willing to lie, cheat, and steal to do so? Or is she chaotic because she destroyed the minds of what we assume at this point in the game are innocent individuals for nothing more than her own personal safety and that of the people she is traveling with?
To be fair to Clarissa on the latter portion, the minds of these people were already well and thoroughly destroyed.
That's true, but she knew that this drug was doing a number on their ego, and
Hmm.
she took a small amount of glee in tricking Canadius into believing he was not just previously the commander of the brother Justicar of the Brothers of Gorm, but now he was just a lonely dreamer, and then rebuilding him into just another mook.
On the other hand, if you hadn't rebuilt him as a mook, he would have gladly just stayed in front of that statue on top of the pyramid until he died of exposure.
Oh, definitely. There is every chance that if she hadn't done that, he would have just died, and she has
Mhm.
saved his life. But what kind of life is it when everything he knew and was doesn't exist anymore?
The real question you might have to ask is, was he who he thought he was to begin with? When our good friend Timmy starts to think he's Canadian, I mean, spoilers, spoilers,
We haven't
spoilers.
we haven't gotten there yet. But as things stand, JD, of those three, what do you think Clarissa, the cleric, falls under?
Good question.
I don't honestly like your opinion.
Hmm.
There is no wrong answer. I will not be offended whichever way you vote.
Definitely not lawful.
Are you sure?
Absolutely. Caring for all living things would not lead you to want to break the minds of people, even if you think they're under some kind of bad enchantment.
Nazis?
You shouldn't want to break the minds of Nazis. You should want to kill them.
We can rebuild you, make you useful to society again.
We
No,
can
you can't.
rehabilitate you.
No, you can't.
You sure?
Yeah, Nazis aren't people.
All right, so in your opinion, definitely not lawful.
It doesn't feel chaotic. Well, chaotic, does it?
No.
Well, she's happy to lie, cheat, and steal, and for her own benefit.
Has she lied, cheated, and stealed for her own benefit?
Well, tried to, for the most part. Unfortunately, the Trinities have been there to actually be lawful and honest and stop her in her tracks, but not for lack of trying.
But also, the last time you were given a free exit, like if you just wanted to save your skin, you even negotiated to save the skin of the whole party. Remember? And you could have just said, "Okay, let us go."
That's true. Gorm did agree to lift the sandstorm and let us free, and
Yes.
because Gorm agreed instead of trapping us into servitude, Clarissa did agree to, yes, we need to save the city. Now this is no
Mhm.
longer a demand. I will happily help you.
To be fair, a lawful person might would have actually done that too. After all, just because just because you wouldn't naturally agree to do a thing doesn't mean that you want to be forced to do a thing.
She's got big things against slavery and servitude.
Would make sense coming from a former slave.
So I would say probably neutral.
Probably neutral.
just doing what they think is best at the time. I think she's probably, because she was a slave, not too keen on philosophical questions and just kind of running with it.
Taking things as they come, not necessarily out to hurt anyone or protect
Right.
just themselves, but doing what they
Just
think
taking
needs
things as
being
they
done.
come.
Okay, and I could definitely see her as neutral. I don't think she's lawful. She is far too happy to lie, cheat, and steal to advance the cause of those around her and herself. She's struggling with the impact of destroying Canadius's mind. It's weighing on her.
Didn't seem like it.
Oh no, you never let anyone see you sweat.
Right.
The secret to success is to remain confident in your own infallibility while learning from your mistakes.
That's right. She grew up as prey in a predator's environment, and she learned to project that surety. But no, she's really torn up about Canadius and what happened to those guys. But if she weeps about it, if she feels for it, it's a sign of weakness, and that's a problem.
Uh,
But also consider that, going back to my example of the abolitionists were quite willing to lie, cheat, and steal in order to move their cause forward. Many of these people were very dedicated to this idea that individual rights were more important than property rights, that individual liberty was more important as a good both for the individual and for society as a whole, that slavery itself was an evil that harmed the world, not just the individual enslaved. So being willing to lie, cheat, and steal for a greater cause than yourself doesn't necessarily keep you from being lawful. And while granted, your lying, cheating, stealing were initially going to be self-serving, after all, you encountered 6 well-armed, well-armored men who you were quite worried would decide to simply kill you on the spot if they didn't like the answer you gave them, which, to be fair, had I rolled a 2 on the dice instead of a 9, they would have immediately just tried to kill you on the spot anyways.
They could take us
Easily. Collectively, they had 7 hit dice. Canadius by himself would have caused serious damage to the group, and the other 5, and then the other 5 men in the other room that you didn't know were there, could have caused you significant damage. And yeah, there's every possibility that it would just have come up snake eyes, and you would have instantly been in a fight. They were following under, and are still following under, the same rules as any of the other monsters there. You're not quite aware of that yet. So, a little bit of spoilers, but these are not... You have not been given 11 armed men to your command. You have been given a trap.
We can handle it. He'll be fine. I trust in Timmy's ability to lead them.
He's gonna wield them, at least.
Timmy is correct. Okay.
All right. I'm still learning the names.
That is the correct one, yeah. Tommy is the wizard, Tony is the thief. He doesn't trust them still. He's worried very much about how insane they are, and he's just going to use them as best he can.
Hopefully
Also,
we get them out of this alive.
Yeah.
It would be nice if you could get them all out of this alive. But, well, we'll get there. Again, spoilers. As I've mentioned several times during our play sessions, alignment is kind of on probation. And I do fall more towards JD's comments of, especially for humans, like, alignment is a fluctuating thing. Because of the mystical nature of the game universe, while angels and demons don't have free will, they still have alignment because they are forged by the mystical foundations of those concepts of law and chaos. Also, most of them are made by deities who have those alignments, so they reflect their creators. Demons and angels are not born creatures, they are made.
They're constructs?
Effectively, yes. The demons are agents of entropic entities for the most part, though sometimes also of chaotic immortals. Whereas the angels, or more neutral creatures, I don't have a word for such beings. What would a neutral angel be?
Well, the equivalent concept in Pathfinder is aeons.
Aeons.
Yeah.
Huh.
Or you
And
just
the
use the catch-all of celestial.
celestial.
I'll have
Yeah.
I'll have to see if there's anything definitive in Wrath of the Immortals. But yes, as a general rule, they are creations by the immortals that allow them to interact more directly with the human world, as the basic rule of the continuing chess game of the gods is that interacting directly is verboten. Mostly
Right.
because any one god just showing up on the field of battle personally could blow up the planet on accident as a whim kind of thing.
Damn PowerPoints.
They are radically powerful. They're on a completely different scale. You do not leveled characters are not going to be going, and we're not.
You know I'm going to try and kill a god eventually. Don't give me that.
Yes, somebody is going to attempt to go full Raceland, and it's going to go just as badly as it did for him.
I'm going to do the
I'm
other
built
Raceland
different.
thing and have sex with a god.
Both of
Also,
our
the
ideas
Elminster thing.
involve penetration.
True.
I don't recall Raceland having sex with a god. What?
Didn't he have a relationship, like a at least vaguely sexual relationship with Tiamat at one point?
No, that was an apocryphal story, and it was verified as such in Dragons of Summer Flame.
Oh,
Editor Son, go do your research.
If
When
they
this video
went and
posts,
changed
hopefully
it
there will
again,
be a clarification on screen.
when they if there is a clarification on scene, I can tell you that it's almost certainly against the wishes of Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, because that is how they had wanted it to end.
right.
There is, like I said, there is what is considered an apocryphal tale, a short story that someone wrote about that, and the concept of Raceland having had a daughter, which did make up a good portion of the first part of Dragons of Summer Flame, in regards to Caramon's son. But again, I'm just mostly being the
Okay,
bigger
then
nerd here.
I'll just change my answer to Elminster.
That works.
Raceland's the one who killed all the gods of Kryn, and it went badly for him.
It does usually.
He was never meant to be happy.
Ooh.
Well,
Well, that's ow.
Am I
It might not
wrong?
be. I mean, it might not be wrong, but you shouldn't say it.
what's interesting though about the Test of the Twins is that we got a really good analysis and discussion kind of how weird concepts of free will and predestination kind of work. One of the constant questions that Raceland Fistendauntless was asking is, have I already done this?
Really?
As he moved through time and found himself repeating the same actions that had already been recorded in history, he constantly was asking, have I already done this? Is this a predestined
Oh,
thing? Did I have a choice to do this? Is who I am something that I have willed and elected to be, or because of the paths of destiny and time, am I forced to be this person, whether I want to be or not?
The wheel of time turns, and myth falls to legend, and something, something, something. But no, it's all cyclical. Free will is not real in that setting.
It isn't. Dungeons and Dragons has a very I Dragonlance. I love Dragonlance. It was the first Dungeons and Dragons setting that I ran into, and I ran into it and Ravenloft before I knew that Dungeons and Dragons was a thing.
Same.
So I'm just reading these books as books, without any understanding that there's a game setting behind them or any of those conceits. So of course, encountering these much more high-minded ideas and questions about morality and free will in something that is normally considered to be throwaway literature, because this is kind of Dune level shit, and it's in a Dungeons and Dragons book.
Oh yeah, Weiss and Hickman did not fuck around.
They did good work. If you haven't checked
Yep.
them out yet, you should go check out the original Dragonlance series. But that was our take on good. I'm sorry, not good. Lawful versus chaotic versus neutral. In the comments, post what you think Clarissa actually falls under. And please see the campaign diaries for more information on her shenanigans and sins.
Like, subscribe, share. Let all your friends know about us. Let your enemies know about us. If
Tell
you
your
don't like
mom.
us, definitely let your enemies know about us.
If
Send
not,
us to
I'll
the
give you an
president,
ill-advised
whichever one
penalty.
happens to be in office at this point.
Send us to the Secretary of Defense.
If there
By
is a
then,
Secretary of Defense anymore, who knows? We might be living in an apocalyptic wasteland. In which case, send us
water.
to
Send us water.
send us to that road warrior guy. What was his name? Just walk away. You know the one.
Mad Mal?
No. God save me.